I saved my parents from bankruptcy, but on my wedding day, my boss crashed the reception, smirking. You thought you could get away with this? My groom stepped forward and said, actually, I think you'll want to hear what she has to say first. I never wanted my wedding day to be memorable for the wrong reasons. I wanted it to be simple, beautiful, sure, but mostly peaceful. I wanted to dance with my new husband, drink champagne, and pretend, for just one night, that life was perfect. But life isn't perfect, and neither is love. The moment Victor Langley walked into my reception, I knew the life I had carefully built was about to crumble. The murmur of voices in the ballroom died down. Music faded into silence. Guests turned their heads, whispering confused. They had no idea who he was, but they could feel it. His presence eschewed the warmth out of the room. And then he smiled. You thought you could get away with this? His voice was loud, sharp, cutting through the quiet like a cayenne fay. I felt my stomach drop. My skin went cold. I was standing at the center of the dance floor, surrounded by my closest friends, my family, people who had come to celebrate me, celebrate love. And yet, here he was, pulling me into a different story. When I had fought so hard to escape, I barely had time to form a response before Caleb, my brand new husband, stepped forward. His hand brushed my waist, protective, steady. But when I looked at his face, there was something there I hadn't expected. Not fear, not anger, but understanding. Actually, Caleb said, his voice even unreadable, I think you'll want to hear what she has to say first. Langley's smirk twitched like he was debating whether to indulge us or tear the entire evening apart right then and there. The air in the room was suffocating. Every eye was on me. Every nerve in my body was screaming. Because this was it. The moment everything would come crashing down. And it had all started exactly 1 year ago. I was never the type to take reckless risks. I had always been cautious, careful, logical. But when my parents nearly lost everything, something in me snapped. My father, Henry Calloway, had spent his entire life building his construction company from the ground up. He wasn't a rich man, but he was honest, hardworking, and respected. At least, until he crossed paths with Victor Langley. Langley wasn't just a businessman. He was a shark. A billionaire real estate developer with a reputation for destroying anyone who stood in his way. He had power, influence, and enough lawyers to bury anyone foolish enough to challenge him. My father had signed a deal with one of Langley's subsidiaries, a contract that should have secured him steady work for years. But buried in the fine print were clauses, ones that made it impossible for him to back out without financial ruin. It was a trap. And once my father was in, Langley tightened the noose. I had never seen my dad broken before. But the day he told me they were going to lose the house, I saw it in his eyes. The defeat, the shame. And I couldn't let it happen. I worked for Langley. Not directly. He was too important to deal with employees like me. But I worked at Langley & Company as a senior financial analyst. I knew how the company operated. I knew the numbers, the secrets. I spent months digging through records, tracing shell companies, uncovering fraudulent deals. I was careful, methodical. I made sure that when I finally struck, I would hit him where it hurt the most. I had no idea he would find out it was me. And I had no idea that in the middle of my war against him, I would fall in love. Caleb was never supposed to be part of the plan. I met him at a bar on a random Thursday night. I was exhausted, drained from another grueling day at work, staring at a glass of whiskey like it could somehow solve my problems. And he sat down next to me. He was confident, but not arrogant. Charming, but in a quiet way. He had this warmth about him, something steady, grounding. We talked for hours, and for the first time in months, I laughed. We started dating. Slowly at first, then all at once. He became my safe place, the one person I could breathe around. I never told him what I was doing, never told him about the evidence I was gathering against Langley. I didn't want to drag him into it. I didn't know he was already in it. 2 weeks before my wedding, I received a message that changed everything. I know what you did. Enjoy your wedding while you can. No sender. No details. Just a warning. I should have panicked. I should have run. But I had worked too hard to stop now. And then, 1 week before the wedding, I found something else. An envelope tucked under the windshield wiper of my car. Inside was a series of documents. Emails, bank statements, wire transfers, and a photo of Caleb, standing in Langley's office, shaking his hand. For the first time in my life, I felt truly hollow. I had trusted him. I had loved him. And he had been working with the man who destroyed my father. I wanted to confront him, demand answers. But something told me to wait. Something told me to be patient. Because if Caleb was lying to me, I needed to know everything before I made my move. And that's exactly what I did. I married him anyway. Now, standing in my wedding dress, in front of everyone I love, I watch as Victor Langley takes a step forward. I have to admit, he says, his voice dripping with amusement, I didn't expect you to be this bold. But you're not nearly as clever as you think you are, Ava. I hold his gaze. Neither are you. His smirk falters just slightly. And then Caleb speaks. Victor, he says, his tone casual, before you say anything you'll regret, you might want to take a look at this. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out an envelope. Langley's eyes flicker to it, wary. Slowly, Caleb steps forward and presses it into his hand. Langley hesitates. Then, curiosity wins. He rips the envelope open. And for the first time since I've known him, I see it. True, genuine fear flashing across his face. His grip tightens around the papers. He looks at me, then at Caleb. Then, his face twists into something dark, something dangerous. You think this will stop me? He hisses. And that's when I hear it. The distant wail of sirens. Growing louder. Getting closer. Langley's face drains a color. And I smile. Because tonight isn't just my wedding night. It's the night I take everything from him. Langley stood there, the envelope clutched in his hand, his fingers gripping the papers so tightly they crinkled. His jaw twitched, his carefully composed mask slipping, just for a second. I knew that look. I had seen it before when he thought he had complete control over a situation, only to realize the ground was shifting beneath him. The sirens were growing louder. I could hear them cutting through the humid Atlanta night, weaving through the city streets, getting closer. Langley swallowed, but his face twisted into a smirk again. You think you've won? He sneered, though there was an edge to his voice now. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Ava. I tilted my head slightly, keeping my voice light. Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. The guests were still frozen, their whispered confusion growing louder. My mother was clutching my father's arm, her face pale. My bridesmaids exchanged worried glances. Some of the older guests, the ones who had worked in business long enough to recognize Victor Langley, were slowly backing away, like they wanted no part in whatever was about to happen. Caleb took a deliberate step closer to Langley, his expression unreadable. Victor, he said, his voice calm, steady. I choose your next move very carefully. Langley's eyes flickered over to my new husband, and there was again that moment of hesitation. That split second where he realized something was wrong. Caleb had been careful all night. He hadn't let on that he knew Langley would show up. He hadn't even acted surprised when the bastard crashed our wedding. But now, the way he stood there, his posture easy but firm, the way he was looking at Langley, not with fear, not even with anger, but with something close to amusement, made me realize something else. Langley wasn't just losing. He was starting to understand why. His grip tightened around the papers in his hand. You've made a mistake, he spat. I don't go down that easily. Caleb gave him a slow, almost lazy smile. Oh, I know, he said. That's why we were thorough. The sirens were deafening now. And then, flashing red and blue lights illuminated the floor-to-ceiling windows of the ballroom. The chatter in the room turned into outright panic. People turned, gasping, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Langley tensed. He glanced toward the exit like he was weighing his chances of making it out of here before things got worse. I wasn't going to let him. I stepped forward. Leaving so soon? I asked, my voice mockingly sweet. I thought you wanted to celebrate with us. Langley's eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw it. True, unfiltered rage. The kind of anger that made men like him dangerous. You don't know what you've done, he said in a low voice. You think you're in control? You think this is over? I let out a soft breath, feeling my pulse hammering in my throat. No, I admitted. Not yet. But would be soon. Langley wasn't STPID. He knew if the authorities had enough to come for him publicly, especially here at an event packed with witnesses and influential people, it meant they had something solid. The man had gotten away with fraud, extortion, and corporate sabotage for years. But no one, not even someone like Victor Langley, was untouchable forever. He took a slow step toward me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You think you're so clever, he whispered. You think you're different from the rest. But trust me, Ava, I will crawl out of whatever hole you try to bury me in. And when I do, you won't see me coming. I didn't flinch. I didn't let him see how hard my heart was pounding. Instead, I smiled. Then I guess I'll have to make sure you stay buried. For the first time since he walked in, Langley's smirk vanished completely. And then the doors burst open. The ballroom flooded with federal agents. Langley barely had time to react before the agents swarmed him. The ballroom erupted into chaos, guests gasping, chairs scraping against the floor as people scrambled to get out of the way. My mother let out a soft, shocked cry, clutching my father's arm. My bridesmaids stood frozen, their champagne glasses forgotten in their hands. Langley turned sharply, but before he could make a move, two agents stepped in front of him, blocking any possible escape. Victor Langley. A voice rang out, smooth and authoritative. The lead agent, a tall man with sharp features and a crisp navy blue suit, stepped forward, flipping open a badge. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, tax evasion, and multiple counts of corporate racketeering. Langley's face darkened, his jaw tightening. This is a mistake, he growled. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The agent remained unfazed. We know exactly who we're dealing with. He motioned to his team, and within seconds, one of them pulled out a set of handcuffs. Langley stiffened. For the first time since he had walked into my wedding reception, I saw it, the panic creeping into his features, the realization that this wasn't just some minor inconvenience. This was real. This was the end. He turned back to me, his eyes burning with fury. You think this changes anything? He hissed. You think you've won? I met his gaze, calm and unwavering. I don't think, Victor. I know. The agent grabbed Langley's wrist, snapping the cuffs around them. You have the right to remain silent. He began, his voice even practiced. Langley didn't fight. He didn't try to run. He knew better than that. But as the agent started leading him toward the exit, he locked eyes with me one last time. This isn't over, he said, his voice low, a final warning. I just smiled. Oh, I think it is. And then he was gone. The ballroom was eerily quiet in the aftermath. Guests stood frozen, still processing what they had just witnessed. A few whispered in hushed voices. Others simply gawked. Then, the sound of a champagne glass clinking against a fork echoed through the room. I turned to see Caleb standing beside me, holding his glass high. Well, he said, voice light but firm. Now that that's taken care of, shall we get back to celebrating? A few guests let out hesitant laughs. Then more. And suddenly, the tension in the room began to ease. The music started again, soft at first, then growing louder. The spell was broken. Conversations resumed, drinks were refilled, and slowly, the night carried on. I exhaled, finally allowing myself to breathe. Caleb turned to me, his expression unreadable. Are you okay? He asked gently. I looked at him. My husband, the man I had married without knowing the full truth, the man I had once thought had betrayed me. But now, standing here with him, I felt none of the doubt, none of the uncertainty that had once plagued me. Because Caleb had been on my side all along. You knew he would show up? I said quietly, not accusing, just realizing. He nodded. We had been tracking him for weeks. We knew he was getting desperate. I swallowed, glancing toward the doors where Langley had just been dragged out. And the evidence? The files you gave him? Caleb's lips quirked. Just a final nail in his coffin. You did most of the heavy lifting, Ava. The case against him was strong, but your work sealed it. I let out a breath, shaking my head. So this whole time, you knew what I was doing? He hesitated for just a moment before nodding. I didn't know at first. But once I figured it out, I knew I had to protect you. He held my gaze. I wanted to tell you the truth sooner, but I couldn't risk it. Not until I was sure we could take him down for good. Something tightened in my chest. Not anger, not even regret, but understanding. Caleb had never betrayed me. He had been fighting beside me all along, just in his own way. I stepped closer, my fingers grazing his. So, what now? He smiled. Now? He gestured toward the guests, toward the still-playing music. Now, we enjoy our wedding. I let out a soft laugh. You think we can just pretend none of this happened? He shrugged. Why not? He's gone. The case is closed. And we still have cake. I stared at him for a second, then shook my head with a grin. All right, I said, taking his hand fully in mine. Let's celebrate. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I let myself enjoy the moment. Not because I had won, but because I was finally free. The headlines were everywhere. Billionaire Victor Langley indicted on multiple fraud charges. Real estate tycoon faces decades in prison after federal investigation. Former caught in major SEL. Insiders say he never saw it coming. I sat on my balcony, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the city. The air was crisp, the morning quiet. Beside me, Caleb flipped through a newspaper, his expression amused. You know, you made history with this one. I smirked, sipping my coffee. Good. Langley's empire had crumbled. His businesses were shut down, his assets frozen. His high-powered attorneys were doing everything they could to keep him out of prison, but it was a losing battle. The best part? My father had gotten his justice. Langley's fraudulent contracts were overturned, his company's illegal dealings exposed. My parents had kept their home, and I had walked away without a scratch. I turned to Caleb, studying him for a moment. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night? He chuckled, setting the paper aside. Nope, because I think we would have ended up right here anyway. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help but smile. Langley had thought he could ruin me. He had thought he could trap me, control me, silence me. But in the end, he had only set me free. And as I sat there, the city stretching out before me, my husband at my side, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about justice, about taking back what was stolen. And I had done just that. Now, finally, I could move forward. Without fear, without regret, without Victor.